What is the matrix? Most of us stand in the midst of confusion about the world that we live in. We look for answers from our friends, family, pastors, or community leaders. We usually are content with their response and look no further. However, some of us are more inquisitive than others and look for better answers. With all the different perception and deception out there, how can one identify the truth? Have you ever realized how education affects your everyday belief? And why does your cultural background affect your choices like that? And religion, why is it so important but so misleading? With all these questions said, what if they were all used to create a false reality? While against it, I realized that I did not stand alone. I found people willing to make a stand with me. You see, while we are born and will die alone, we were all created for each other. And it is with each other that we will be able to rise again by knowing our true history and the reason for these misconceptions. Let's take this journey together with the Awaken Foundation and bring clarity to this matrix. Good evening. My name is Jeff Paul. I am the Awaken Foundation founder. There are multiple people in our team that are doing a great job to actually make the impossible possible. But I'm realizing that it is getting harder every day. How can a group of people living a swell life not realizing that they are at war? We have been led to believe a lot of things. Some of us understand that it's their foundation, so they will not change it until they become victims of this system, and then they try to look for a solution. In my case, I was asking, how am I going to be able to help my people? A people that are sleeping, I would say. They want to wake up, but they can't. The system has a very strong hold on them, where money and illusion of power controls even their own inner understanding. I asked God a question. I said, God, how am I going to lead a group of people like this? He asked me, what do you think is the relationship between hardware and software? Well, the question didn't really come like that. It said, what is the interface between hardware and software? But interface may sound a little bit more technical, so I said relationship. How does one speak to the other? My background is engineering, so I remember that back in college, I did not get to understand that question, even though the explanation was very much fuzzy at best. The main response was there is a fourth dimension that we are not aware of, and there are specific items or entities that actually speaks a specific language. And that language is called binary, which is a synthetic way of describing electrical impulses on and off signals. And that actually is how you communicate with computers. But then it didn't quite sit well with me because of what I started to learn about my country, Haiti, and also about the world that we know of today. That didn't sit too well. So I waited for one of my colleagues to come down, and we sat down, and he asked me why was I so puzzled. So I told him that, well, you know what, I'm trying to answer a question. What's the interface between hardware and software? And he said, it's really simple. No, it's not the keyboard. Then he looks at me. He's like, can you explain a little bit? Oh, yeah, okay, real simple. I said, close your eyes. So while he closed his eyes, I went into my wallet. I took out a $50 bill, and I acted like I ripped off a piece of paper, so I didn't give him the predetermination that it was money. So I said, here, take that for a second. So he grabbed the money. And I said, what is this? And while his eyes was closed, he told me that it was paper. I said, you sure? He said, yes. I said, open up your eyes for a second. He opened up his eyes and said, oh, crap, it's a $50 bill. I said, it is a $50 bill. So before, it was just a paper, but now it is a $50 bill. What can you do with a $50 bill? Well, $50 bill, I can buy stuff, things like that. You know what you can do with $50 bills. And I said, oh, so now it has a value, it has a depth, and it has a function. He's like, yeah. I said, oh, well, guess what? You've been programmed. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, that's the basis of flashing. Usually by looking at what you're seeing, you actually know what it's there for because you already have a preconceptual perception of what those things are. And then by putting it together, you understand what it does and what it means and function of it. And he said, wow, yeah, it kind of makes sense. And I said, well, you know, the real interesting thing is what you saw on that piece of paper, because when you touched it, the texture of it, you understood it was paper. A very, it's a dead material made out of, you name it. Could be cotton, could be, trees, it could be whatever it is, and recycled material, but it's paper. But the drawing on it, it's not paper. It's actually a representation of your mind. It's actually something called a metaphysical element. What is a metaphysical element? A metaphysical element is a mental projection onto a physical item, or it has an interactive aspect onto a physical item. There's 3 types of metaphysical element, and your body allows you to function within these 3 types of metaphysical element, produce it and receive it. Now, let's go into the first metaphysical element, which is the visual element, which actually is produced by touch, which is the skin, which is the interpretation of your mind using your hands into the real world. So, if I take that $50, so I told the doctor, if I took that $50 and I put it on a piece of table, and then I grab 4 elements, very simple elements: a bar of iron, sand, oil, and a rock. Let's call the rock graphite. And I said, can any of these four elements tell me that this is a $50 bill? He smiled for a second. He said, is that a joke? And I said, no, it's not a joke. It's actually a real question. And he said, no, those items cannot even tell me that it's a piece of paper. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, because those items are dead material. They're not alive. They do not have a spirit inside of them. And I said, you sure? He said, yes, I'm pretty sure. And I said, there's no way they can tell you it's a $50 bill? He said, Doug, my man, they do not speak. They do not speak. And he's right. They cannot speak. But I told him that I have an issue with that. And he said, what is the issue? I said, well, if you take a telephone, like a cell phone, or if you take a computer, any computer, these items that makes up the computer are dead material, isn't it? He said, yeah. I said, would be rocks that will create the graphites, which gives you the hard drive? He said, yes. I said, sand, which could be used for the glass? He said, yes. I said, iron, which connects, or any type of metal which would connect any different section of components that creates a specific sets of frequencies? He said, yes. And I said, what about the oil? Dead material, dead skin, or organic material that has actually condensed and liquefied and now has become a plastified section, and then now that item now is being used as bezel or insulators. And he said, wow, yeah. And I said, well, these four elements, it's what makes a computer, isn't it? He said, yeah. And I said, well, how will you tell the computer to do something through what we call a metaphysical element? Because the programming is a mental item. He stopped for a second and he said, wow, that has never been brought up to my attention like this. And I never thought of it like that. Give me a few seconds. I'll let me think about it for a second. I said, please take your time. And then he said, I got it. I said, what is it? He said, well, it's energy. Energy is the only item that was brought onto that platform. And with energy, now we can actually interface with the items. And I think that energy is the item that is intellectual in the entire process. And as soon as he said that, I literally jumped up and jumped off my seat and I gave him a big hug. He said, what's going on, man? I said, listen, man, you just answered a question that was right in front of my eyes and I could have never seen. He said, what do you mean? I said, listen, for the longest time when I was in college, what they taught us about energy is that it's mechanical. You would see energy or electricity like a river of potentials. And depending on where you tap into that river, it actually has different sets of power. And these powers can actually activate something that is literally, moving something. So it's literally mechanical. And depending on how you can route that energy will have more power or less power, which interact with whatever mechanical elements. And then that is what energy was, like electricity. That made sense to me because I do engineering and I do electricity as well. But I never really thought that energy was intellectual. That was never been brought up to us or to me as a potential or possibility. And then I understood everything. See, my journey was about knowing thyself, understanding who someone is, but in my case, who I was. See, I was raised in a way where I would acclimate to everybody. I would be like a chameleon. Wherever I was, I would fit in very well, just because I wanted to feel and see how people are. But I also realized that I needed to create my own identity. After the death of my father, that identity became more and more obvious. My goal was to seek who my God was, the one that my mother introduced me to, the one that I had a relationship with, and I was able to finish school and get married to the woman that I always wanted to marry since I was 9 years old, the one that actually allowed me to become a better person every day. I wanted to know him better. But the experience that I ended up getting blows my mind. Because what he did is he revealed to me something that the world may be deaf ear to, even though all the evidences are in front of them. But sometimes it takes somebody with an irrational, or I would call it erratic mind, to understand exactly how this chaotic section actually makes a lot of sense. And then when they put them all together, it feels like, wow. That's what happened to me. I ended up understanding why and who the Haitians are and were. Wow. So the answer is energy. Energy is the intellectual property that you can communicate with. Now, here is the real beauty of this. Like I said, since I was a kid, I was raised as a Christian. But there was a lot of construed perception within the Christianity perception that I didn't quite accept because there was no evidence to back it up or support it. So, but it has always been the point of reference of everything that I would want to do, like the moral aspect and everything else. So when I looked into this, I realized that even in the New Testament, when they were introducing the man called Jesus, it says that at the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word became God. That was really interesting, because now at this point that word made a lot of sense to me, because I'm a linguist. So being a linguist, I understand exactly what sonorization based on emotional interpretation does to people. Let's say if you have somebody that actually sees a monster in front of them, and they'll say, "I'll blah, blah, blah," as an example. And then every time he sees the same person or that monster, he'll say, "Oh, blah, blah, blah." So at one point in time, if you're around him more often, you realize that "ah, blah, blah, blah" means here's this monster. That becomes a word. So it's the emotional impact versus the vocalization of it that actually creates literally meanings. The same thing goes for writings. So it's the emotional impact that actually creates the understanding. Great. Where am I going with all that? Well, it also means that the vocalization of that has to come from an inner thought. So that means that it's a spiritual process. That spiritual process actually created the verbalization. So it's air, lungs, the vocal cords modulate with your tongue and then comes out with the energy modulated. And that is literally the expression of that energy into the physical realm. So that voice is actually called a metaphysical element. Interesting. Okay. What does that mean? Well, that means that at the beginning, there was the word. So that word was an intellectual property that actually was being formed. But a word is actually a vibration. Any form of word is a vibration. So every form of vibration is an electrical power. Electrical power is actually a force. Like the name says, power. So it is a force. So what does that do? Well, electricity has multiple properties. One of them is magnetic. Magnetic means that it can attract or repel. So now here it is. At the beginning, there was a word, the intellectual property that actually creates a word. The word was with God. So the word is not God. Interesting. It's a spiritual entity that actually has ability to speak. But that is not God. And the word was with God, but the word became God. What does that mean? Well, it means that when I read the Bible, the only entity that is that close to God is called the Ruach Kadesh, which actually is the Holy Spirit, which is actually feminine, by the way, in the Hebrew language. So that feminine power has the ability to express, and then part of his action is to push or pull. Very interesting word. Because according to the New Testament, it stipulates that Jesus says that he's leaving, but he's going to leave something that his father left behind that has a greater meaning than he does. And that experience that you're going to have with that particular power, which he calls the Holy Spirit, is what we need to understand. So that made sense to me. The Holy Spirit is the electrical energy force that is actually within this world. It helps create anything and everything that you see today. In the Genesis, it says that God actually called everything into existence. And if you do have a Hebrew Bible, you're going to find out that at the beginning, it says Elohim. So Elohim is actually the plural of the name God. So God is not his name. You have to understand that. It's almost like me saying Papa. Papa is Papa. That's my father. But is that his name? No, that's not his name. Now, in order for you to understand what his name is, he has to tell you his name. But here is the problem. In the Bible, what they have done is every time that they would actually refer to God or something that is similar to God, but it's not God or could be God, they would call it God. So Elohim, which is plural, is God. And then, it's funny because you would say that God said, let us make man in our image. So that's ambiguous at best, but what can you say about this? Huh? Well, when you get into the foundation, you'll understand a little bit more, because we go in depth into understanding all these terms and why those terms exist and how does it affects you into this time. But let's go back. So the Holy Spirit has what we call the building block of what? Of creation. So its existence is communication. Every form of electricity is also magnetic. Every form of electricity, it's also a frequency. Every form of frequency is what? Interactive. And how is it interactive? Very simple. Whenever you look at the table of the table of elements, what do you see? Oh, I see a lot of different items. And how do you know these items? Well, you understand these items through what we call the frequency range that they have. So every single item or every single electrons within these items creates a specific frequency. That frequency range is what you can actually analyze and say, this is what iron is, this is what gold is. So that force, that energy within that particular instant or that molecule or whatever it is, if it can be measured, you can actually give it a name. Can you communicate with it? Yes, you can. And you have always been able to communicate with it. A certain group of people have actually more ability to speak to it than other group of people. I'll come to that. Now, here's what actually kind of threw me off a little bit. When I look into that book called the Bible, it stipulates that at one point in time, there was it didn't say an angel, but it said a star that came down. But according to the Hebrew Bible, a star is actually an angel. And the star came with the key to the bottomless pit. Now, here is the problem. That key was given to a specific group of people. And these people were supposed to do only one thing: open up what we call the bottomless pit, according to the Old Testament. Now, no, according to the New Testament, sorry. So when we looked into it, and I was like, wait a minute, what does that mean? So now that I understand what energy is, and it's an intellectual property, and I also understand what is the interface between hardware and software, which is that particular force, that intellectual force, then I also realize how the spiritual element can actually speak to a dead element. And then I also realized what that key was. That key is actually a cipher. What is a cipher? A cipher is literally a set of rules and regulation that is based on numeric evaluation, or quote unquote, I would say not mathematical, but it would be more geometrical understanding of relationship. And then that key actually allows what we call the spiritual entity to actually come into this realm. So that bottomless pit disallows that spiritual energy to come and dwell within this plane of existence. Not planet, plane of existence. Planet is actually a plane of existence. That's really what that is. But I've said plane of existence for you to understand that there are different plane of existence. So while this spirit, according to the New Testament, is in the plane of existence of its own, which does not allow it to interact with this line of reality, that key allows it to interface with this realm. This was the way for they call it the Antichrist, but in reality, that's not its name. It's not Antichrist. You can actually verify who he is through some of our studies. So I go in depth on that. I actually tell you who he is, what he does, and how he actually comes about, and why is he so popular nowadays, even though you don't even think you know him, but you do. So, That key was given. That is the interface. Now, why do I tell you all this today? Well, I tell you all this because the foundation understands that people that are Haitians or Americans or Native Americans or born in the Americas that have a specific set of features which they would call Negroid. These type of people are being rejected throughout the whole entire world. And there's a consensus. That consensus is to literally belittle them and making them feel that they are really nothing. Some of us who actually embrace, some other culture and try to repel your own culture, you have maybe done better than others. Or your lineage may have already have a relationship with the other side, and you have been doing better than others, and you never really quite thought about the process of you not being in relationship or in I would say in experiencing being a victim. Let's put it as that. So, what does that mean? Well, that means that what I've learned about us, the Negroid, is that everything that they told us is actually not true. Everything that they are perceiving us are actually defamation of character. They're giving us religion. It was brought on to us. That was the whole purpose of the Crusades. They're giving us power. They're giving us authoritative figure that acts like what we have always known. And you'll find out if you listen to who the Queen Elizabeth supposed to represent, which literally came from you. They will use your own flag and your own understanding and your own writing against you. Now, your own writing is really simple. When you look at the Jubilee Law, which is actually the way where somebody would work for you for several years, and after that, they would be able to get a mule and anything else that the land has to offer from you. It's the same concept with the indentured servitude, and that is what created the slavery mentality, and then the defamation of slavery in the future, where you think that the Kunta Kinte or the Amistad is actually all about, which has nothing to do with what slavery was. But so, who are we? Well, first and foremost, we are not Africans. The term Africans, even the Africans don't even know that term. The term Africans come from Africanus, which was a Roman governor of Tunisia and Morocco, I believe. So that was that little piece of place up there. The entire landmass south of the Sahara Desert used to be called Ethiopia, even though the ocean that we're calling Atlantic or Ocean used to be called also Ethiopic Ocean. I found multiple maps from the Mongolians or the Chinese that talks about the Americas also being called Ethiopians, which mean burnt skin people. Wow. But the Americas also have a different name. It used to be called the Indias. Now, when you think about Indias, you're usually thinking about the southwest land called India today. But until 1968, it was never called India. It used to be called Bharat. So Bharat was the land, and the people of Bharat used to be called the Endu people because of the Hindustan River. So that's why they never really assimilate themselves to Indian or being Indians. Very important. But the Indians here are actually Indians because the land was called India. Interesting. Now, India, by whom? Is it just by the European? No, by other nations also as well. Why and how would you know? Well, they'll tell you in different ways that other nation has actually come to the Americas, and they have actually found artifact from the time of Emperor Constantine here. They also found items from the Vikings, and they found, oh God, even Egyptian artifact was found here. Now, wait a minute, time out for a second. All that? Absolutely. Well, who comes to the Americas and leave? You got to think about that very hard. You've been here for a while. Have you left yet? Do you really want to live? The land of milk and honey? Do you really want to live? Think about that very carefully. Now, I do go in detail and tell you exactly why you have these artifacts here. And also why the term Amaru Khan was actually used in order to call this land today America. So Amaru, which means dark land, Khan, which is king, so the dark land of the kings, was also in Egyptology called Kemet. So Kemet is what? Egypt. So they rather call this land Egypt in a different term, which called Amaru Khan or America, all right, so that you don't realize you are still in Egypt. Now, wait a minute. Is this whole entire land Egypt? No. There were multiple group of people in this land. The land that you have to look into is the land called the Mexican land. The land of Meshi. Who is Meshi? Meshi was, according to Diego Duran, so Diego Duran was actually sent by Queen Elizabeth and King Ferdinand to talk to the people of Haiti and come up with a better understanding of the culture and the people and have a hands-on onto things. So he created the first Mexican codex. There's multiple other Mexican codexes out there that actually been stored into the Vatican Library. But this one is available because nobody reads this thing. But what does Diego Duran says? Well, he talks about a man called Meshi who actually had a scepter of a tree, I don't remember the name of the tree, in his hand, but who partakes the Red Sea. When he partook the Red Sea, he brought his people into freedom and led it into a place called Judah. Judah. That sounds a lot like Judah or Utah. Anyway, what do I know? There, when he reached the land of Judah, he actually went on the top of the Mount Moab. There at Mount Moab, he saw the entire land of Canaan, where the Canaanites were. Canaanites, that sounds a lot like Canada. It's just one word that they move one place to another. I mean, that may not be it. But at that point, he defeated all these people there. So who are these people? You have the Phoenicians, the Moabites. You have, they killed the entire city-state called Jericho. Whew! A lot of people died. But, the funny thing is, why would God allow the massacre of all these people? Well, you have to go back into what we call, back in the days. It's the time of Noah subdividing the land to his children, where this land was actually promised to the lineage of Shem. So when the lineage of Shem got there, they saw the Hamites into this land, and that's why it was allowed by God to actually take this land from the Canaanites, which was the line of Ham. But if you go into the detail, you'll actually know that Ham actually tried to get his son out of the land of the Shem, blah blah blah. But that might be a little bit that might be a little bit boring, you know. But it's good to know though, because it gets to a point where you actually are able to define who are the Canaanites. That's very important to know who the Canaanites are. Not that it's bad to be a Canaanite, by the way. No. The sin of your father is not your sin. Always remember that. The sin of your father is not your sin. But if you do your father's will, and your father's will is a sin, then those sins are yours to bear. That's why I believe that everything that I say right now not only has a profound understanding on who the Haitians are, but also it will liberate the mind of the Haitians. A country of people who do not even understand where do they come from. They have the ability to perceive things, but they've been told that they come from a land called Africa. Well, Africa was not Africa. Back in the days, it was called Ethiopia. Now, thinking about the process of even doing the transatlantic slave trade, if you think about it for a second, from Europe to Haiti, it was 4.5 months. But yet from the coast of Ethiopia, I would call it Ethiopia, it was between 5 to 6.5 months, depending on if they had good wind, because they were against current. So the ship was done the same way as the Pinta, Lena, and Santa Maria. There was the same ship. That hasn't changed. Even back in the 1800s and all the ships that were built, they're all the same. Think about it this way. The centerpiece was actually not for people. It was for food. And you also had the crew. On the top, you had the captain and some of his crew, like the high-end people. On the center part, you have the main crew. And the most aspect of that portion was food. Food, food, food. And then at the bottom, because it was 3 level, okay, at the bottom is what? Is the rocks and the water and the heavy duty items. Why? Because that would keep the boat afloat. Now, 76 people, 3 boats, and yet, after 4.5 months, they were dying of hunger. You're going to tell me you're going to put 300 people into the center part of the boat. Where do you put the food? On the top? No, because of the sea salt and everything else. It's impossible. At the bottom, well, you have all these rats and everything else. And then after you depleted the food, then what's going to keep the boat afloat? So even that in your own head, you have to think about it very hard. Is this even feasible? How long can you live without food? Wait. How long can you live without water? Top, 3 days. Food, 2 weeks before your stomach starts eating itself. So, understand that this story is a far-fetched story, but I can back it up. See, that's the problem. Because this was what we call a commercial endeavor. So there is what we call records. And these records, even though a lot of them were falsified, but these records are still clear and still present. And then when you realize, you're going to realize very soon that there were not a lot of African that actually came into the shore. But what you had, though, is a displacement of family from the north of Ethiopia, which is the north of America, all the way into the center part, into the South America. So they were doing the same thing. They were taking them from both ends, bringing them into Haiti and Cuba, which was the hub, and then they were dividing the family and then sending them in different locations. But what people don't realize is that Haiti, since the first year after Christopher Columbus came, they started to fight back. And that is that blows my mind. Because they didn't have a chance to get the slave anywhere. But these people who fought are still there today. They were called the Maroons. They were called the warriors of the land. But in Haiti, they would call them the Maroons were Marronage, which was actually like the people that fled away into the higher ground. But in reality, the Maroons was always known to be what we call the warriors of the queen of the island, which was Awaken. And you'll find the same warriors in different islands. Jamaica, you'll find them in Cuba, you'll find them in different places. Not because they fled. No, it's because they knew the island so well, because they were the hunter-gatherers. So what am I saying here? Talking about Meshi being in the Americas, talking about Diego Duran writing the Mexican Codex, which sounds a lot like the Old Testament point of references. Talking about, us not coming from Africa, but even more, talking about Awaken, which is Kahuna. Awaken, who is she? Awaken, if you look into, I can actually put some of the links down below, would be the direct descendant of King Solomon. So there were two King Solomon. There was Solomon the first, which is the son of Prester John, and Solomon the first also married Queen Khalifa. So with the Solomon, he had another child. That child, he gave every single component of his kingdom. He gives half to her. And he tells her that he has to build the temple and keep what? The covenant. The new covenant. That sounds intriguing. So Solomon the first had another child called Solomon the second. Solomon the second now have another child, and her name was Awaken. That sounds a lot like Kahuna, by the way. Well, that's exactly who she is. Now, wait a minute. I just told you, as of now, that the Haitians are a direct descendant and holder of the covenant. Direct descendant of King Solomon and a man by the name of Prester John. But Prester John, I would actually have to go back and actually tell you who that man is in detail. That's going to baffle you, because there's a lot of bad connotation that actually follows him. But at the same time, there's also some different countries that says it's things that are completely different than what the European says. So you have to really look into it with a keen eyes and a real cipher. So that's what we intend to give you, a real cipher. I have to say thank you to Kurimeo Alt. I have to say thank you to 123 Drop. These people have dedicated their life for the past several years to actually bring you an impressive library of research. And the only time that everything's going to be clarified is when the Haitians wake up. There's a reason why your country is being the way it is right now. There's a reason why you need to wake up and understand that the material good that you have nowadays is being targeted. And money is not really the key component that's going to liberate your country. It's a wake-up call. It's understanding that you are truly, a true descendant that's going to make this world a better world when you realize who you are. Because all your fame and all your glory, all your writings have been given or accessed to other people. People that are acting as you. But when you wake up, you're the only one who has the key to open up the covenant. And when that happens, what do you think is going to take place? You had a booster when A man, I don't remember his name, from Jamaica, but in Haiti they called him Bookman, came into the island and invoked the High Almighty to give us, or the Maroons, power to overthrow, for the last time, the abusers. You spent 400 years fighting, but yet that day was determinate to actually give you a free reign on saving slaves throughout the entire world. Yes, you did slave the physical aspect of it, but you never thought that they were going to come back with a moral and mindset that is a spiritual shackles. That's the 200 years that you spent with what we call the indecisive setup that does not allow continuity even in your own government. Destabilization creates division. Division is now able to be conquered. But now that you know who you are, I will go into depth to explain that to you. And I hope that you will understand that you have all the right ability to work with one another. Because now you know that your brother truly is loved by God. Your color is not the color of an oppressed and unwanted and dirt and dark and all these bad antonym synonym that diminish that brings you down to underground or whatever. That's not what your color is, and what your color mean either. We explains that myelinating that gives you the vitamin D and protect you is actually a battery. It's like a solar panel. But yet, if you don't like it, that's your business, because you have been brainwashed thinking that your color is not worthy. Yes, you've seen a lot of discrepancy back home, but what have you done to make a difference? Well, we're going to give you a chance to do that, because now it's the time. Now it's the time to understand. And guess what? I've just given you something that is very important. It's the definition of what is the interface between hardware and software. It's the ability to speak to the Holy Spirit and actually activate all blessing, power, and abilities within this realm that has been and always been with you, but you were very much unable to tap into it all the time because of your perception. Now that you know who you are, I hope with conviction you are going to be able to call upon that power, that person, to truly give you the ability that you need, because Haiti needs it, you need it, and I need you. Thank you.